Hi friends, this is Amit. Today we are going to see how to play chess, and let's start with the rook. The rook can move in horizontal and vertical direction. So it can move right, left, up and down, and it can occupy any of the squares. Now we'll see how the rook captures. Okay, as you can see over here, the rook can capture opponent's pawn, opponent's bishop. So we can capture our opponent's pieces or pawns and we can occupy that square, as you can see. But definitely the rook cannot jump over the pieces. So I cannot capture his rook because my own piece is in between. We'll see how the bishop moves now. The bishop can move diagonally in all four directions. So it can move like this. I'm marking the squares with the red color so you can see on which all squares the bishop can move. So bishop can move diagonally in all four directions. So the bishop which is on the white colored square will always be on white color, and the bishop which is on dark square can always move on dark color. Bishop cannot change its color. Now we'll see how the bishop captures. Bishop can capture opponent's piece which is in the diagonal direction. So bishop can capture the rook or bishop can capture the knight. So as you can see, I can capture this rook and I can occupy that square with my bishop, and I can even capture the knight and I can occupy that square. But like rook itself, bishop cannot jump. Let's see how the queen moves. Basically, we can say that queen is combination of bishop and rook, and queen is a very powerful piece. So it can either move like a rook, right, left, up and down, and at the same time it can even move in the diagonal direction like a bishop. What I'll do is that I'll mark the squares where the queen moves such that it will be easy for all the viewers to see how it moves. So it can move like a rook in right, left, up and down direction on all the squares which has been marked by red color, and it can even move like a bishop in all four directions diagonally. So as you can see, queen can cover many number of the squares, and thus queen is very powerful piece. Now we'll see how the queen captures. Queen can capture, as I have already mentioned, that queen can move like a rook or queen can move like a bishop. So it can either capture opponent's piece diagonally or it can even capture a piece horizontally or vertically like a rook. As you can see, I can capture opponent's pieces and occupy those squares, and just like rook and bishop, queen cannot jump over the pieces like this. As you can see, I cannot capture my opponent's bishop because my own pawn is in between. So this is knight, and knight moves in L shape. So if I'm moving towards the right side direction, so it can come over here on this square, or as I said in L shape, so two squares like this, and then I have to make a turn. So I'll either land on this square or I can land on this square. On the left hand side, again two squares in left hand side, and then we have to change the direction by one square. So the knight can come either on b3 square or knight can come on b5 square. On the downside, knight can either come on this square or knight can come on this square. On the upside, knight can move two steps up and then you have to turn it like this. So knight can move on this square or knight can move on this square. I'll just mark the squares on where the knight can go such that you will have a fair idea. Now remember friends, knight is the only piece which has the ability to jump over other pieces. It doesn't matter whether your pieces are in between or your opponent's pieces are in between. It can jump over the pieces and it has the ability to capture your opponent's pieces by jumping over them. Let's see this position and understand how a knight captures opponent's piece. Remember, knight is the only piece, as I mentioned, which has the ability to jump over the pieces. So knight can capture this queen, this rook or both of these pawns, as it has the ability to jump over the pieces. So this is the king, and king can move only one square. It can move in any direction, but it can move only one square. So I'll just mark the squares such that it would be easy for understanding where it can move. As you can see, the king can move in all the directions but only one square. Similarly, king can capture our opponent's piece which is in the range of that one square. So I can capture this rook, but I cannot capture the bishop because it is far away. These are the pawns, and pawn usually moves one square. But in the initial position, it has a power that either it can move one square or two square. It depends on us. So let's say if I move this pawn two squares and black moves this one square. Now if I want to move this pawn again, this will move only one square because I have already moved this. But still I have not yet moved this pawn. So any of this pawn can either move one square or two square. Let's say if I move this pawn one square, now it is black's turn and he can still move this pawns which he has not touched either one square or two square. It depends completely on him. But if he wants to move this pawn, then this pawn can move only one square. Pawn moves in the straight direction, but it cannot capture in straight direction. Pawn captures diagonally like a bishop, but only one square. Okay, now in this position again, as you can see, either I can move this pawn one square or I can capture this pawn. Now in this position, black has two options: either he can capture with this pawn or this pawn, or he can totally ignore and play something else. But always remember, pawn moves in the straight direction, but it captures diagonally. Pawns are the only entity in chess which cannot come back. Now we'll see how to set the pieces, how a chessboard is setted when we want to start a game. So starting with the rook, the rooks are setted in the corner of the board. Okay, then comes the knight, which will come near to rook, and then comes the bishop, which is just near to knight, and then is the time to set king and queen. Now always remember, queen is on its own square, so white queen will always be on white square and black's queen will always be on black square. And then on the only vacant square which is there, you have to set the king, and pawns should be in front of all these pieces. Now let's see what is check and how to defend it. Check is when any of the opponent's piece will attack the king, that is called as check. Here as you can see, opponent's queen is attacking our king, so this is check. Now we need to see how to defend it. There are totally three defenses of check. The first one is moving the king on a safe square. So I can move the king on this red marked square in order to save my king. The second defense to check is I can block the check. So I can bring the bishop in between. This is called as blocking. And the third defense is you can capture the piece which is giving check. When any of these defenses will not work, that is called as checkmate. Let's see this position. White can play simply rook over here, and as you can see, he is not having any of the safe square because the king cannot come here. The king can't come on this square because the rook is controlling whole line. At the same time, the king can't come on this square, the king can't come here, and the king cannot come even on this square. So all the squares has been controlled by both the rooks. At the same time, this check cannot be blocked, or black is not having any piece which is capturing the rook which is on b8. So this is called as checkmate. When black is defenseless, he cannot save any of the check by any of the method which we have seen, that is moving the king on the safe square, blocking, or capturing the piece which is giving check. If none of this defense work, it is called as checkmate. And this is the way how white can win the game or black can win the game. We can win the game by doing checkmate. Now the game of chess can also end into a draw, and there are various ways in which the game can end into a draw. Let's say if white plays his queen on f7, that is he takes his queen on this square. Now as you can see, black is not having any check, but his king cannot move anywhere else. At the same time, he is not having any other piece or any other legal move which he can play. He has a pawn, but that pawn has been blocked by our pawn. If you'll observe that he is not even having a check, so this is called a stalemate, and the game is considered to be a draw. Next is a draw by agreement. Now if you'll see this position, if both the players play properly, there is no way white can win this game. So let's say if the game just goes on like this, in that case I'm just making random moves and both the players can agree. But if still both the players are not agreeing and they just keep making the moves, random moves, then there is another rule, that is a draw by 50 move rule. If both the players play 50 moves without a capture or without a pawn move, even that is considered to be a draw. I'll again repeat it, 50 moves without a pawn move or capture is also considered to be a draw. At the same time, both the players in any position has the option to draw the game by mutual agreement. There is another way where we can draw. As you can see this position black is dominating because he is having more number of pieces compared to white, but still white has a possibility to draw this game. White can play queen on this g6 square, and as you can see it's a check. The pawn cannot capture the queen because this bishop is giving check. It is not possible, this pawn is under a pin, it can't move, so black is forced to move his king on h8 square. Now again I'll give a check, he has to make the same move, again I'll give a check, he has to make a same move. So this is called as draw by repetition of moves. So if the moves are repeated 3 times back to back, both the players are playing same move, in that case it is considered to be a draw. If any of one player is changing the sequence of moves, let's say if white plays something else but black is just repeating the moves, in that case it is not a draw. If I move my queen anywhere else and if black plays the king on same square, if black keeps on repeating the move but I am not repeating, that means it is not a draw. But in this situation, as you can see, that if white will change the move, then the chances are that black will win the game. So in this case white can force a draw by repetition. Now there is another way in which the game is drawn, that is draw by insufficient material. As you can see this position, white has alone bishop with the king, and alone bishop cannot check and mate black's king. So this is draw by insufficient material because white is not having a winning material. Similarly, even if white has alone knight or black has alone knight, still we cannot check and mate our opponent because alone bishop or alone knight is not having the ability to deliver a checkmate to our opponent. So this is also a draw by insufficient material. If there are only two kings are left, even this is a draw by insufficient material. What if the pawn reaches last line? In that case, this special rule comes into play. When the pawn reaches last line, you have the option to promote this pawn into a queen, either a rook, either a bishop, or either a knight. So you can promote this pawn either into queen, as I mentioned, either into rook, either into a bishop, or either into a knight. But usually we'll promote it into a queen because queen is a very powerful piece. So it all depends on position. Now we'll move on to the next special rule, that is en passant. A pawn can en passant a pawn, or pawn can capture our opponent's pawn by en passant only if it is on 5th rank. If opponent plays this pawn just for one square, I can capture it simply because a pawn captures diagonally. Now remember this, en passant is a rule where you can capture only opponent's pawn, you cannot capture opponent's pieces. Okay, so if my pawn is on 5th rank and its corresponding pawn which is on the right hand side or the left hand side, if we moves 2 square at a time, I have the ability to capture it like this. Similarly, if my opponent moves this pawn 2 squares like this, I can even capture like this. Okay, but there are few things which we need to remember, there are few conditions. Let's say if my opponent played like this, I could have captured him straight away, but I ignored it, I played something else, and now if he comes here, now I cannot en passant this pawn. Why? Because he has not moved that pawn 2 squares at a time. Now as you can see, this pawn is already on 5th rank and black plays this pawn 2 squares. So similarly, I can capture this pawn in en passant. Okay, now if my opponent played this move, I just ignored it and I played something else. Even black plays a random move. Now I cannot capture this pawn. So you have to capture that pawn immediately. Now we'll move on to the next special rule, that is castling. There are two kinds of castle, short castle and long castle. So usually the king moves 1 square, but castling is a rule where the king moves 2 squares and the rook comes out, as you can see near to this. This is short castle, and in long castle again the king moves 2 squares on the queen side like this. As you can see, the king moves 2 squares and that rook will come over here. But even in castling, there are few things which we need to understand. There are few rules. So let's say if I have moved this rook, black plays something. Now I cannot castle short because I already moved the rook. Even if I come back, I cannot castle short, but yes, I can castle long. Okay, similarly, if I have moved this rook anywhere, now I cannot castle long. Even if it comes back on its original square, I cannot castle long because I already moved this. But yes, I have the ability to castle short. Okay, the next thing, if I have moved the king, at any moment in the game, I lose the right to castle. Even if I come back on the same square, I cannot castle, be it short castle or be it long castle. Once I move the king, I can't castle. If opponent is giving a check, I can't castle. Remember this thing, I cannot castle now because there are basically three defenses of check which we have already learned. Either you can move the king on the safe square, either you can block the check, or you can capture the piece which is giving check. But castle is not a way to escape from check. Remember this thing. So if your opponent is giving a check, you cannot castle. Yes, if you can block the check or you can capture your opponent's piece, like if you have not moved the king, definitely in that case, after successfully blocking the check or after capturing the piece which is giving you the check, if you have not moved your king, if you have not moved your rooks, you can castle either side. But whenever your opponent is giving check, you cannot castle. Let's say if the rook comes on the square, now I cannot castle short. Why? Because my king's journey is been interrupted by my opponent's rook. Yes, I can castle long, but I can't castle short because of my opponent's rook. Or if any of the opponent's piece basically is interrupting your way of castling, you can't castle. Similarly, if the rook is controlling this square, still I cannot castle because my king is landing on the square where it's a check. So I cannot castle short in that case. If the rook is on this square, I cannot castle long because my journey has been interrupted by this piece of my opponent. If the rook is on c4, again I cannot castle long. Why? Because the rook is interrupting that square. Yes, but in this case itself, I can castle long now because the rook is controlling a wicked square. So now my friends, you know the basics of chess and even the special rules. That's it for the day and I'll see you in next video. Bye.